Okay, let's get started. So I want to talk today about a project that we did involving co-creation. And we've written this up as a paper, but I don't want to focus too much on the academic literature or hypotheses or so on. Just want to really describe what we did. And we carried this out pre-pandemic, but it was still an online type of assignment, so it's still relevant, I suppose, for anybody that's still teaching online today. So what we were looking at was the impact of content co-creation on academic achievement. So we know what we deal with in the classroom. We've got millennials, they're quite techie in one way but not techie in another. We've got large diverse classes and we want students to be motivated. We want to get them involved in critical thinking and engage them in content. And co-creation is one of these, I suppose, ideas that has become more mainstream in higher level education. And it involves staff and students working together to create content, whether that's teaching together, creating online content together, or creating courses together. So that there's a huge amount of literature on co-creation. But the idea, I guess, is that it fosters deep learning and high levels of engagement among students, and it motivates students in terms of engaging in enhanced conceptual understanding of the content. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to test this and have a look at different types of co-creation that we could engage with students, where students are creating content, and see if that had an impact on their learning. So we selected two different types of co-creation. So one was that students would actually write their own MCQs. So we use MCQs a lot in large classes. They're scalable, they're easy to mark, and so on. But it's much more difficult to write an MCQ than it is to answer one. So the idea was that the students would engage in writing their own MCQs on particular topics, and that would encourage them to learn the topic in more depth. And they're all familiar with what an MCQ looks like. So that was one of the co-creation tools we used. The second was that students would create a video that would be aimed at teaching their colleagues or their classmates something about the module content, and they were to be 3-minute videos. So I suppose what our research focused on was to see if these co-creation activities encourage the students to learn the topics in more depth than they would if they were just following on with lectures and tutorials as usual. Okay, so in order to look at this, we were anxious obviously to measure the impact of the co-creation activities on students' attainment of learning outcomes. So we had to figure out how we would measure that. So we did this in a third-year undergraduate tax module. There were 202 students engaged in the module. And we selected 5 topics from the module, which were kind of mainstream topics. And each student was assigned one of those topics to write an MCQ on, and a second one of those topics to create a video on. So they had 2 different topics for each of the assignments, and then on the other 3 topics they didn't have to do anything. And that this was randomly assigned so that each student had 2 different topics, say, from their classmates and so on. So we had videos and MCQs based on all 5 topics going on throughout the module, but students just engaged in the 2 that they were assigned for their MCQ and for their video. So they created the MCQ using the PeerWise platform. That's an online student-centered platform where they upload their MCQ. It's accessible then to all of the students. So what this also did was create a bank of MCQ questions for the module that all students had access to. The students had to write 1 and answer 3 in order to be assessed on this particular activity. And as I say, it created a whole question bank. They then had to also, on their different topic, write or create a 3-minute video. Most of them used voice over PowerPoint or some sort of cartoon type video technology to create the 3-minute video. And a selection of those videos were also available then to the whole class for them to revise topics. So we created sort of this, a lot of content, I suppose, for the module from these. So in order to test the impact of the co-creation activities on the attainment of learning outcomes, we had a compulsory question at the end of the module, 1 question that was broken down into 5 different parts, 1 part each based on the 5 different topics. So each student would be answering that compulsory question with the 5 parts, 2 parts of which they would have based the MCQ and the video on, and the other 3 that they wouldn't have done that. So it was a way of us assessing whether they did better in the parts of the question that they had done some co-creation on versus the other parts, but without creating a control group, because each student engaged in the activities, but the control group was the questions that they didn't do the activity on, if that makes sense, from just an experimental perspective. Okay, so our hypothesis was that the students would achieve higher marks in the part of the question where they engaged in that co-creation type activity, whether it was the MCQ or the video activity. So we did find that students did better statistically significantly in the sections of the, sorry, I've gone too far there. There was a statistically significant difference in the marks that the students achieved on the topics on which they performed that co-creation activity compared with the marks they achieved on other questions. Now in this particular paper we also looked at learning styles and linked learning styles with the type of activities, but I don't really have time to get into this in this particular video. So I suppose to conclude, we found that we were anxious, I suppose, to design something that investigated the impact of assessment co-creation on academic performance and the achievement of learning outcomes. We, in the paper, were able to articulate how we implemented that co-creation type activity into a module, at scale. These types of activities are scalable because you end up with a bank of MCQs and a bank of videos, so the students are actually teaching each other or commenting on each other's questions or videos, which creates a nice repository of content for the module. And we found that our results suggested that students did learn better or achieve the learning outcomes better on the content on which they had done some co-creation. So the paper is published in Assessment and Evaluation in Higher Education. The link is there for you, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.